Doreen has now been in prison a long time. In fact, she writes me about every day, and this is the collected correspondences so far. She's at day 150 something right now. 5 months. And every moment of that time is an injustice being done. It's really outrageous, and I don't have the words for it. We just last week filed the reply in her appeal. That's the final filing involved in the formal appeal process. In the sense of briefs, it may be that there will be additional motions filed, and it may be that there will be oral arguments. With any luck, that'll take place. Those are not scheduled yet. And as far as the decision is concerned, as things stand right now, it could be quite a long time down the road. In fact, it is likely, if there is not any change in, if there's not an if there's not an expedited appeal structure set up for the oral argument and decision, it's almost certain that Doreen will actually have served her entire sentence of incarceration before a ruling is made on the appeal. So it's been a very hard 5 months. Over the course of that time, Doreen has slowly, I think, become at least acclimated to the situation. Not comfortable with it, of course. Unless you've been through it, it's very difficult to understand how oppressive it is to be being subjected to an injustice. There's an expression in the English language called Kafkaesque, and it refers to being enmeshed in an institutional insanity and an institutional impropriety in that particular case of a bureaucratic character. But it has a nightmarish connotation, and in fact the experience has a nightmarish quality. It's one constantly relies on things being done as they ought to be done in our lives, and in a case like this, things are being done as they oughtn't to be done. That was the course of things in Doreen's trials, in which what we all expect to be a fair process was anything but a fair process. It was just rich with corruption, and it is partly as a consequence of that, and the essential corruption of the whole object of the exercise, in which Doreen has been charged and tried and taken away to prison, taints every part of the affair, so that her current circumstances in a prison camp in West Virginia are themselves an extension of or continuation of that same corruption that marred the trial proceedings and the charges in the first place. So I don't know what really to say about the situation, other than it's been a terrible situation for Doreen, for me, for our kids. It has been challenging to attempt to meet the expenses, the legal expenses associated with it. In fact, we really have not been managing to do that yet. We have received some wonderful donations from some folks, and we appreciate those hugely. We need more, I'm sorry to say. It's just a fact. Even defending yourself against an injustice is expensive, and that's how it is proven to be. We went through the trial proceedings without any expenses. Doreen represented herself, did a wonderful job under the circumstances, but we had to bring someone in for sentencing purposes and for the purposes of the appeal, and that means paying someone to do that work, and that's what it's a problem right now. The place that Doreen is at is an interesting place. It's a 60 or 70-year-old formerly private prison that has been taken over by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. It's called Alderson, Federal Prison Camp Alderson. It's in West Virginia, in Alderson, West Virginia. Little, not even a one-light town. It's a stop sign town, single stop sign town in central southern West Virginia. About 550 miles from here, up in the mountains, not way high in the mountains, but in the medium range Appalachians. Very spacious place. At one time, it appears to that it was actually, for a prison camp, almost kind of comfortable accommodations, at least. At the time that Martha Stewart was there, everyone lived in, the inmates lived in what were called cottages, and they had individual rooms with individual bath facilities, bathrooms and curtains on the windows and things like that. It's now everyone, the inmates live in essentially bunkhouses. They reside in tiny cinder block U-shaped cubes, just big enough for a set of bunk beds and lockers, and the place is not, doesn't have a brutal appearance. It's a camp. It's not a formal prison, so it doesn't have barbed wire all over the place and so forth. But of course, the women there are obliged to remain on the grounds and abide by staff directives and be in at certain times, and are only able to move about on the prison grounds, as the structure permits, or the system permits. Excuse me. So it is, it's imprisonment, even though it's called a camp. So it's important, I think, that people remember that what it is that Doreen is in this place for. So I want to review that real briefly. Doreen and I were ordered 8 years ago by a federal judge to create false documents, false tax return documents, contradicting those that we had freely made, and declaring on the false documents that we believed certain of our earnings qualify as income in the context of the tax, which we do not believe as far as those particular earnings are concerned. This was done so that the government could treat our earnings as taxable and impose a tax, something that it has never done. To this day, we've never had a tax assessed against us, contrary to the content of our returns, and the government has never created its own documents contradicting what we have said on our freely made returns. This all came about because basically in 2001 and 2002 I uncovered some realities about the income tax that the government agrees with. It has acknowledged the truth of those revelations on hundreds of thousands of occasions over the 12 years since I first published my findings. But it finds that information extremely inconvenient, and when the time came that it discovered that lots of people were learning this truth, it engaged in this assault on Doreen and I, pretending that it found a problem with returns that it had, as it turns out and as the evidence shows, had studied intensely before acknowledging. In 2006, 4 days before tax day, it launched or served us with papers on a lawsuit claiming that it had made refunds to us in error, and then engaged in a series of falsified evidence production and a completely sham legal proceeding in which no hearing was ever conducted, no live person ever appeared in front of a court. False evidence was presented by the government, as I said. The government wrote a judgment that the nominal judge in the case then simply signed, and as part of that judgment, orders were made to Doreen and me to create the evidence that the government didn't have, which is to say we were ordered to create tax returns saying that our earnings qualified for the tax. And not having done that, ultimately, and not having done that in an obvious exercise of our First Amendment rights, ultimately Doreen was selected for a charge of contempt of court for refusing to relinquish her First Amendment rights and speak using government dictated words over her own sworn signature. She went to trial in October of 2013. That trial ended in a hung jury. The government came back again, and in July of 2014, excuse me, engaged in a truly egregious assault on the concept of due process and a fair trial. The judge in that case instructed the jury that the unlawfulness of the orders Doreen was charged with disobeying was not to be considered a defense to the case. The jury was relieved of having to come to a unanimous verdict about Doreen actually having committed the alleged acts of offense in the indictment. The government engaged in an outright fraud, declaring an event that was not true, and ultimately admitted to that, but was forgiven for it by the judge. Many things, too many to list, went on in that trial in an effort to secure conviction from a jury. I guess another thing actually worth mentioning is the fact that the Supreme Court and Sixth Circuit court cases declaring the unlawfulness of the orders that Doreen was accused of criminally resisting were kept from the jury's knowledge. It was a really horrendous exercise in corruption, but the object was to keep people from, to try and prevent more Americans from learning the truth about the income tax, and and inconveniencing the government by that acting on that knowledge. Despite this effort by the government to thwart the spread of that information, it has continued to spread, and people have continued to act, and they continue to get all their money back from the government or keep all their money in their own pockets. I want to reference a couple of web pages that people might find interesting and informative. HTTP /losthorizons.com/bulletinboard.htm. A packet of information on the lawsuit, the sham lawsuit that was used to produce these orders that Doreen was accused of criminally resisting, can be found at losthorizons.com/documents/presspacket.pdf. And general information on Doreen and her circumstances can be found at losthorizons.com/newsletter.htm #ISWD, which stands for I Stand with Doreen. At that spot, one can learn how to write to Doreen, her mailing address, how to make donations to help with legal expenses, how to put a little something in Doreen's commissary account so she can live a little bit better than she otherwise is able to in prison. And at that location, you can read the appeal brief and reply, and other information of that sort. See films about Doreen and her circumstances, and basically get a complete picture of everything going on in this outrageous case, this outrageous assault on the First Amendment. It's not just an assault on Doreen's First Amendment rights, it's an assault on your First Amendment rights, on everyone's First Amendment rights. If the government can get away with ordering someone to say what it wishes over their sworn signature, in this case they can get away with doing it in other cases, and they will. We all know the progress of these sorts of affairs. Think of RICO laws, started to attack organized crime and now used against abortion protesters and anyone, frankly. We live in a world now where we have to jealously guard our liberties because they are under attack, and if this assault is left undefended against, it is just the camel's nose under the tent flap, and things will get worse. So I urge everyone to be mindful of that and step up, make some noise about Doreen's case. There's been no media coverage to speak of, with the sole, well, perhaps not quite sole, but with the exception of the work of Shane Trejo at the Pontiac Tribune, a few other folks. The American Free Press has done some stories, a couple of others, but no one in any form of the mainstream media, and nothing in even the high circulation alternative media, and it's very disturbing. That's what needs to happen. I want to urge everyone to make noise about this case, to stand up, to contact other media outlets, bring this to their attention. There's a tendency on the part of people, I think, to imagine that because there's a tax dimension to this case, that somehow somehow government abuses are forgivable or understandable or something. Everyone is so accustomed to being beaten into insensibility by the tax system there's a numbness when one thinks of that subject. The tax system is just as much subject to constitutional rules as any other thing that is done by government, and it only gets away with not being so subject because people allow that to happen. We can't afford to do that. We can't afford to allow any latitude of evasion of the Constitution by the state. So please stand up, please raise your voice, please contribute to this cause. Please learn the truth about the income tax, the thing that all of this is being done to keep you from knowing. All those things are important, and it's up to you to defend your rights, to preserve your rights, to have a meaningful legacy of liberty to hand down to your children, and this is where the fights get fought. So please fight.